Welcome to the Black Heart Red Spade podcast. This podcast features long-form conversations with accomplished guests from across the globe on topics ranging from financial markets and trading to psychology, entrepreneurship, and life in general, with your host, Adrian Alberts. Derivatives trading carries significant risk of capital losses and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not indicative of future results. All views aired by participants are their own and intended for informative and educational purposes only. Always consult with a registered financial or legal advisor before acting on any topics discussed. My guest today is Byron Morrison, who is a performance coach, mainly working with CEOs. He's a best-selling author who has written books such as The Effective CEO, CEO in Control, and the latest one, Maybe You Should Give Up. We've known one another for quite a few years now. Byron and I have actually had a podcast beforehand. And it's a pleasure to have him on after 2 years. So welcome, my friend. Good to have you back.
Hey, yeah, I'm really excited to be back. Thanks for having me on as a guest again.
So Byron, we all know your story, from the previous podcast, and I see you've got a new office now. Since the last time we spoke, you had that brick wall with Captain America in the back. I see that he's still there as per usual. How have things been for you over the last 2 years? What's been happening?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting couple of years. With the office change, we moved, set up a new office space. I signed a publishing deal about a year and a half ago for my next book. So that's the Maybe You Should Give Up one that you mentioned. So the last couple of years has been actually really exciting. I've been head down working on that book. We finished it 2 weeks ago. So it's been central for the publisher and it's now going through production and getting ready for print. So they're going to be pitching that to stores for the next 8 months. And we're looking to a big launch across the UK, US, and Canada. Beyond that, I've just been focusing on working with clients. At this point, I've been really fortunate over the last few years. I've worked with CEOs and business leaders in 15 different countries to help them really become better at navigating problems and deal with the pressures of running and growing a business. So, yeah, on mine, it's been a really exciting couple of years of growth. There's been a lot of different challenges throughout that time, but at the same time, it's been a lot of fun really going through the process and pushing forward. So I'm excited to dive into a lot of the things that I've learned because obviously as I've gone through that and I've helped more people, I've really also stepped up my own game and skill set. So anything we can pass on today to really help people manage a lot of those challenges, I want to see how much value we can add.
What has it been like for you to work with CEOs, relative to someone who, say, is not a CEO, but, like an everyday person, if I can use that terminology, of course. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, for me, it's always a fun challenge. That was why a few years ago I pivoted the business because at that time I was working with a lot of leaders and executives and entrepreneurs and also CEOs. And I found that that was the market that I loved working with. Those people performing at the highest level because they really want to push themselves to grow and develop. And that's why, just like working with elite athletes, I see CEOs as the elite athletes in the business world. They're the people who've reached the top, but they also have the most to risk and lose. And that's why they also need to make sure that they're bringing their A game every single day. And for me, this is also where there's such a big correlation with trading and why I know you wanted to get me back on the show, because like with whether you're running a hedge fund or you're trading or running a business, your mindset is going to make or break your success. How you show up, the actions you take, when you make decisions, how you trust your intuition, and also being able to deal with the challenges and setbacks is going to very much determine whether or not you're successful or if you crash and burn. So, yeah, it's been a really exciting journey, but I've seen a lot of ups and downs with that, of different people handling these setbacks, especially with the pandemic, the economic challenges, and everything else going on wrong in the world. It's been really interesting to see how people adapt to it.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And you made a very interesting point there regarding pro athletes and CEOs, being the high performers. Now, I was speaking to a guy called Simon Ree, who's also an author and a pretty well-known trader in the world. He wrote this book called The Tao of Trading. And he made an interesting point that one of the problems with trading, for example, is the low barriers to entry. You can literally just open up a brokerage account and there you go, you can get started. But the problem is that in order to be successful in this game, you need to operate like a pro athlete. And as we both know, talent is a very small component of high performance. So what do you notice to be the main things that separate CEOs from other people? Is it talent? Is it superior acumen? Or is it a lot of other things?
I'd say it's a combination of factors. Like if you want to be an effective leader and CEO, you need to be able to think creatively, you need to be able to inspire people, you need to be able to innovate, but also you have to have the mindset to be able to develop and think 5 steps ahead. Because most people live their lives just focusing on short-term problems, what's happening this day or the direct challenge in front of them. Because if you want to grow and scale a business, you have to be able to think 5 steps ahead. And one of my apps, and the listeners to this will probably relate to this, so that's why it's an important thing to go down, is probably my favorite example of this was by Ray Dalio, where he was talking about the order of consequences, where every action that you take has got a consequence. And most people just focus on short-term consequences, that in the now satisfaction. Whereas if you want to be a successful leader or trader or business owner, you have to be able to make sacrifices with short-term risks that are going to lead to long-term payoffs. I think this is, especially as we go into all this economic turmoil, and you've probably seen it a lot more than I have, but it's people panic selling and making short-term mistakes. And it's the people who hold or make bigger decisions, looking at where they want to be 5 steps from now. They're the ones who are going to come out of this so much further ahead. And I think that's one of the key mindsets you have to have if you want to be an effective CEO. You need to look at, okay, where am I trying to get to? What are the actions I need to take? How do I surround myself with the right people? And then push forward. So it's just constantly this internal mindset of looking at how do you weigh up everything going on, choose where to put your energy and focus, and then balance that with all the challenges and setbacks.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I do like that you mentioned the order of consequences. I actually have that written on a whiteboard here in my place. Remember the order of consequences. And I would like to get your thoughts on this, but I have a theory that most people stop pursuing certain things because they can't get past the first order of consequences. Like working out, for example, it's painful when you start, or even when you're working out, sometimes it can be very painful. But if you can get past those order of consequences, then, better things start happening. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think some people push through that, they get to the second or the third, but then they just fall back to first orders. And that's why the order of consequences was one of the mindset shifts that completely transformed my life. It's something that I use on a daily basis. Whether it's coming down to hitting the gym, working on certain tasks in my business, making big decisions of where we're going to go in direction, I always make sure I map out, okay, what are the potential consequences of this? What are the positives and negatives I have to gain? And how do I really use that to steer my decision making? Because it's so impactful. Because most people just live in the now. They're just focusing on that instant gratification or satisfaction. Whereas, as you've seen as well, the biggest payoffs in life mean putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. You have to make the decisions that other people won't. But I talk about this in my new book, that if you want to create a life that other people never will, you have to be willing to do the things that other people won't. And that means really pushing yourself to face discomfort, to go after what you want, regardless of the barriers in your way, and not just giving in to what you want in this very moment. Because whenever you do, that's when you're really sacrificing your future and the long-term success you could have.
Yeah. Annie Duke wrote a very similar book that has been recently published called Quit. And she also talks about the importance of quitting, probably very similarly to what you do with Maybe You Should Give Up. And you know what? What really stood out for me about what she said regarding quitting was that quitting is so underrated when it comes to success, that knowing when to quit is equally as important as knowing when to show grit and determination.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And this was the core concept of how I actually start the book, of talking about giving up is actually the secret to success. But it's been demonized by all of these gurus who are, keep pushing and just keep putting in the work and eventually it'll work out. And that's just not true. It's just the same as hard work is not the secret to success.
No.
Like if hard work was all that it took, everyone who was doing 60-hour weeks would be successful. But how many
100% agree. Yeah.
but how many people do you know who are just breaking their back in manual labor jobs and working ridiculously hard, yet they're broke and living paycheck to paycheck? And this is why you can give 100 people the same strategy, but they're all going to get different results because it's their mindset and how they show up and when they know when to pivot and how to adapt it that's going to lead to their success. And that's why if you look at the most successful people in the world, they give up all the time. Look at Elon Musk. With PayPal, when he first started that, it was voted the worst business idea of the year. But he gave up on the original concept of using it as a security software for handheld devices and then moved it across to the now financial kind of system that it is today. If he carried on doing what he was doing, it never would have worked. So
Totally.
he gave up on that idea and changed it. And this is very much what the book is about. It's about figuring out what in your life isn't working, what are the barriers in the way that are causing you to sabotage yourself, and then giving you the tools and mindset needed to give up on them, whether that's reacting to the world around you, focusing on short-term thinking, comparing yourself to others, all of these things that stop people from living the life they want. Yeah, I've never heard of Quit, but I'll make sure to check it out because it sounds like it's along a similar kind of concept.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. So Annie Duke is a poker player. She's won quite a few bracelets, and she also
I know who she is.
Yeah, she also wrote this other book called Thinking in Bets. And Thinking in Bets also taught me the importance of making good decisions. And that, look, I don't remember all the aspects of the book, but I also always have something from every book that I've read that stands out for me. And one of the things that she said there was the quality of your life is largely determined by the quality of your decision making, and which I personally agree with a lot. What do you normally see CEOs doing well, in terms of great decisions, and what are the common mistakes that you've come across? Like, are there any common denominators that you've noticed?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of the question. Is the common denominators are focusing on what your immediate problem is. So if you're just making decisions based on the challenge in front of you, you're always going to be making decisions that are short-sighted or focusing on perceived risks or what you might lose out of. And if you keep thinking that way, you're never going to get to the next level. Whereas the CEOs that make the right decisions, as I said previously, they're able to think 5 steps ahead. They're able to look at, okay, this is where I'm trying to get to. What choices do I need to make to get there? It's the same as if you look at the media. I know I used him as an example before, but it's an easy one that everyone relates to. Elon Musk is constantly criticized for decisions that he makes because people are always looking at what he's just done without factoring in why he's done it. Because you can know in the back of his mind, he knows, okay, this is the impact I'm trying to create. This is the level I want to get to. These are the steps I need to go through. So the first step decision may look like a bad one because he might lose money on it, or it might be a play that other people see as reckless. But he knows that by going through that, it's going to get him one step closer towards where he wants to be. And this is why the advice I always give to people is when it comes to making big decisions, you need to take your current reality out of the equation because your habits, behaviors, what got you to where you are isn't going to get you to where you want to be. And that's why you need to start making decisions based on the future version of you. So if you figure out in your mind, okay, where are you trying to get to? Who's that future version of you who's achieved their goals, who's living the life that they want, who has the success that you desire, and then use that to factor into your decisions. So really in that moment, ask yourself, what would that future version of me done in this moment? What decision would they have made? And that's going to give you far more clarity on what you need to do. Because this is huge, especially when finances come into it. Like if you say you need to invest in a new mentor or there's something that you want to do to really extend your portfolio or whatever it is, rather than just factoring in, oh, how much money it is, what risk it is, figure out, okay, who's that version of you? What would they have done? What are the key things that's led to their success? And you're going to have a completely different mindset based on what action you should be taking.
Wow. So it's almost a case of, getting wisdom from a future self to make better decisions in the present. Have I got that right?
Yeah, this is a big part of the foundation of the work I do with clients because a lot of it ties to identity work and really changing the way that you think and feel about yourself. And the way that anyone listening to this can do it is to just figure out who do you want to be 90 days from now? And the reason why I work on 90-day cycles is a year from now, too much can change. There's too many variables you can't factor in. So if you figure out, okay, 90 days, who do I want to be? And then every single day when you need to show up, ask yourself, what would the person I want to become do right now? And this works in everything from whether you need to hit the gym, whether you need to have a difficult conversation, any action you need to take in your life, start thinking and acting as that person. And that's how you'll start building momentum and getting results. So you're taking the current version of you completely out of the situation. As an example, one of the clients I'm working with, the way that we've implemented this is one of his big challenges is he doesn't speak up enough in meetings. He's trying to be too nice a guy. He's people pleasing. He
Agreeable,
doesn't
yeah.
set the right expectations and boundaries. So the way that we've changed that is we've gone clear on, okay, 90 days from now, how does he want his life to look? So when he's in that meeting and his gut's telling him to speak up, but he's not wanting to do it, rather than relying on his current behaviors, he stops and thinks about, okay, that version of me I want to become, what would he do right now? And then he pushes himself to take that action. And he's seen a complete transformation in his confidence and how he connects with people and the results he's getting because he's basing what he's doing on that future version of himself.
Mate, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's also like what Jordan Peterson said on this particular topic. And I know a lot of people hate him for unknown reasons to me, quite frankly. But he mentioned that nothing in life gives you more self-respect, or earns you more respect from other people than when you know that you've got teeth and that you're willing to use them. Now, it doesn't mean that you go looking for fights and all that, but I think what it just shows is that people know that when you are willing to speak up, when you're willing to stand up and step up, that this is someone who can get stuff done. This is someone who is capable. And I think that's exactly what you're referring to over here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And this is hands down one of the biggest challenges I see in the clients I work with. Is a lot of the guys who come to me, they're founders, they start a business, they're growing, and they're fantastic at what they do, but they're completely unprepared for the other challenges that come along with it. They've never managed a team before, they've never held people accountable, they've never known how to manage their time and everything else. So because they want to create an impact, they feel like they need to put everyone else first. So they put their needs above their own. They want to be a nice guy. They don't want to challenge people because they don't want to ruffle any feathers. And this is why a big part of the work that we're doing is getting them to know when to stand their ground. Because you have to pick your battles. You can't just be someone that's walked over in life because you don't get respect and you're not going to get the impact and success you want with that way of behaving. That doesn't mean that you need to be a horrible person or you need to be incongruent with who you are on a deeper level. But you'd be amazed at how many CEOs I speak to actually really struggle with this. And it's because of that mentality of, oh, I need to be a nice guy. And it's just getting them to see that you can still be a nice person who's creating an amazing life for your team and everyone else, but still set clear expectations. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't mean that you're being like a Steve Jobs who's working people to death and just being feared. But it's just knowing, okay, this is what we're trying to work towards and pushing people when needed.
Oh yeah, and it's also about pushing yourself in the right direction too, because the last thing you want to end up, speaking of Steve Jobs, is getting cancer, because what's the point? That's absolutely the last thing you end up wanting. And I still firmly believe it's a lifestyle disease to a large extent.
Yeah. Yeah. I see this absolutely constantly with the people I work with because one of the biggest symptoms that people come to me with is burnout. And 100%
That's a real thing,
lifestyle.
isn't it? I mean, that's an absolutely real thing. Some people say it's nonsense, but I think it's real.
So you have to clarify firstly what burnout is, because there's a huge misperception over it. Because most people think of burnout as being exhausted. And this is why people in office jobs where they diagnose them with burnout, I disagree that they're not burnt out because that's the sort of person they can go on holiday for 2 weeks, they can be refreshed and then come back to normal feeling great. Burnout, however, is when you pushed your body to the absolute limit after working 60-hour weeks or spending your days just putting out fires, dealing with other people's problems. You are just stressed and overwhelmed to the point that every day is a battle to get through. And I see this in the clients I work with that because they're so stuck in the trenches, they've lost sight of why they're doing what they're doing. They've lost that inner fire. They're no longer motivated. Now it's just that feeling of what's the point. So this is why burnout is after an extended period of going through that battle. And this is why I'll speak to CEOs who they're struggling to find the motivation to push towards next, or they're at a level of success where they know that there's a next level, but they don't know if they've got it in them to push towards it because they're barely surviving this one. That is real burnout. And I've seen people who have been through doctors' diagnosis, been booked of work for weeks or months. These are people who are just struggling with energy. They're extremely fatigued, and it's a huge inner battle to get back on track, especially because a lot of that damage has taken years of compounding problems that's built to that, which is why there is no overnight fix. It can take months, if not years at times, to recover from this.
I was going
It's a
to ask
very,
you about
very
that.
real
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. And
So it's not a case
and
of going on a weekend retreat and there you go, I'm back and here we go, ready to go.
no, if you want to properly recover from burnout, you need to do three things. The first thing you need to do is reconnect with your goals. Because if you're not excited by what you're doing, then you're never going to reignite that fire. So you need to, on a deeper level, really figure out, okay, what do you actually want in life? What is the impact? What's going to fulfill you? What makes you get out of bed in the morning? The second thing you need to do is figure out how to actually deal with the stress and overwhelm that comes with it. Because if you're always in a reactive state, it's no reason why. Like, you're just going to feel like everything's a mental and emotional drain. And then the third thing you need to do is figure out how to develop the right routines. You have to have boundaries in place. You need to prioritize looking after yourself. You need to find that balance where you're not just pushing your body to the limit. Because as entrepreneurs and CEOs and people with big goals and dreams, we have this tendency to think that we're invincible and we can just keep pushing through it. And I've been through it myself. Like, burnout is something that I've really struggled with in the past. And I always felt like, you know what, I'll just get through it. It'll be fine. I'll deal with this next year or next month. And that's the problem. Like, we feel like nothing bad's going to happen to us until it
Until it
does.
does.
Yeah.
Exactly, until it
And
does. It's a form of self-delusion in a way, I think.
Yeah. It's also a form of feeling like you don't have a choice. Because when you are running a business and you have all these people looking to you and you have to solve their problems, everyone's counting on you, a lot of the time you can feel like, you know what, I have to get it done. I can't just take some time off or prioritize myself. And this is why I see with a lot of the people I work with, it's very much an inner battle because they feel guilty for wanting to prioritize their own health and sanity. But at the same time, if they don't, it's just a matter of time until the business crashes and burns. So it's a really big dilemma. And I never want to sit here and just be like, oh, you just need to do it. Because I know it's not that easy. And it's really something that someone has to come to terms with, of being like, you know what, I have to make this a priority. That doesn't mean they have to overhaul their entire life and just throw in the towel, just make everything shut down. But there are gradual changes they can make to start getting under control. But I'm sure you see this with traders as well and people in the financial markets where I remember I was working with one hedge fund owner and he was working 14-hour days and he was just obsessed with studying companies. And what he was finding as a result is he was starting his months really good and he was really up and positive. And he was like, I should just stop now. I could end the month, take 2 weeks off, relax and put my feet up. But because he felt like he needed to be doing more, he'd then be exhausted to the point that he'd make bad decisions. He'd make short-sighted plays and he'd start losing money. And then he'd have to try and play catch up. And it was just a self-defeating cycle every single month because he didn't have the right boundaries with himself. And yeah, it's so easy when you're a high achiever to fall into this trap and just pushing through it when actually you should be stepping back.
Yeah, one of my friends called Mayhem would refer to that as dopamine-based trading, for example, where you start chasing that high from the actual achievement of making trades and feeling that you're busy, as opposed to being serotonin-based trading. Do you see any similarities between certain CEOs, for example, who are more dopamine-based and who are more serotonin-based? Because the serotonin thing, it does make sense to me that, dopamine is a great reward system, but you need serotonin to give you more of an even keel as opposed to that high that you're constantly chasing.
Yeah, I see this all the time. And it's part of the problem of growing a business because a lot of people get caught in the cycle of wanting more. And I talk about this a lot in my own content about how growth is actually a huge trap. Because a lot of people just keep saying to themselves, like, when I get to that next level, then I'll have more money, we'll have more freedom, I'll be able to take more time off, focus on myself, my family, and health. But every new level of success brings a new level of problems, new fires to put out, new responsibilities. So you're never going to get to where you want to be. And a lot of that is a delusion. So we chase that dopamine. We're like, oh, once I get there, everything will be okay. Or it's just that feeling of wanting to win. So the amount of people I speak to who just are driven by wanting to earn more money or create more success, which nothing wrong with that, but it's about finding that balance, because fulfillment isn't going to come in that success. And this is also where a lot of people get burnt out, because they're chasing something that doesn't exist. Like the amount of guys I've spoken to who are just constantly chasing money, and then they're just completely unfulfilled and hate their lives. Like I had a new client start with me a couple of months ago who on paper had absolutely everything. He had huge houses, fancy cars, huge amount of money in the bank, ran several businesses. And the first time we spoke, he was like, I'm absolutely miserable. He's like, I spent my whole life chasing money and wanting all these things. And he was just completely unfulfilled. And every single day was the same. And he just become numb to it. And this is why it's that whole thing of chasing money is fine, but you need to know when to figure out what's actually going to bring joy into your life. Because if you don't have that, then what's the point?
Because yeah, exactly, my friend. And something else that's also come to mind for me while you mentioned that is that there is a price to pay for being a high performance person. People think it's a fun ride and all that, but it's not always that much fun. And I think we are, we're both high performance people to varying degrees. I mean, then you get high performance people, you get super high, then ultra high, and so on. And then you get these hyper competitive ones, like your Elon Musk, your Jeff Bezos, and guys who run multi-billion or even multi-trillion-dollar companies, in the case of Apple, for example. But people don't realize there's a massive price that you pay for that too. It doesn't just it doesn't just come easy, and that there are no consequences to it, because there are sacrifices that you also have to make. And it doesn't mean you're good in all aspects of life.
Yeah. I think it's because we put these people up on a pedestal and everyone thinks, oh, they've got it all together and life's amazing. But people don't realize how challenging it actually is. Like the amount of people I speak to who you go on their LinkedIn profile and it's all smiles and awards and everything's amazing. And then I go on a call with them and they're breaking down. And I've lost count of how many conversations I've had with people applying to work with me where at the end of it, they said, I can't believe I've just told you all of this. Like, I've never shared this with anyone. Like, it's incredibly lonely, and people just bottle it up and hold it in because they don't want other people to see that their internal state doesn't match their external success. And yeah, it's part of the problem when you're a high performer, though, because a lot of the time the standard and expectation you set is for yourself. So even though when you should set down or slow down, you just have to keep pushing forward because you know that there's so much more that you could be doing. And this is really why I'm a big believer in you have to focus on a foundational level of figuring out what allows you to perform at your best. You need to really double down on developing the right routines and habits and prioritizing your energy and sleep and other areas of your life. Because when you really tune those in, that's how you get your edge, and what you're doing can become sustainable. Whereas a lot of people don't focus on that and they overlook it. And that's why they don't perform at the level they could. So it's all about looking at, okay, how do you get that in place and how do you then optimize it in a way that works for you? And this is advice I'll give to anyone listening to this. Really figure out, okay, where in your life are you currently being dragged down, or are you not giving the attention you need? Whether it's your sleep, your family, your diet, your exercise, whatever it is that is going to make your body and your mind feel stronger, and make that a non-negotiable priority. And you'll be so glad you did in 6, 12 months from now.
I think it was last year or the year before, when we had a bit of a chat about this, you mentioned the shadow side of success. And that is a really, really interesting concept to me that I've never really heard anyone spoke of. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think that that's something that hits a lot more of us than what we realize.
Yeah, for me, the side of success, it's the dark side of it. It's the side that people don't see. It's when you've running the successful business or you have the successful life and your days just become all about putting out fires or solving other people's problems and dealing with never-ending demands, and how the really high highs are followed by even lower lows and everything's on the line and you're constantly feeling backed into a corner. Like that's the side of success people don't see. They just see all of these entrepreneurs and they think that running a business is a life of fancy parties and private planes and endless cash. And Anyone who's ever run a business knows that that couldn't be further from the truth. Instead, it's very much living a life where every day it feels like you've been punched in the gut and you have to get up smiling, coming back for more. And this is why I believe that you have to be a special kind of crazy to be an entrepreneur or sign up for a life of running a business. Like, it is a roller coaster that I don't think many people are cut out for. And you really have to have the mindset and resilience to be able to go through life knowing that every single day something's going to go wrong. You can have your best ever day in business. I can guarantee there's still going to be issues that are weighing you down. And your average person wouldn't understand that. And it's why I think a lot of CEOs and business owners feel isolated, because they can tell their family and friends what's going wrong, but they're never going to be able to comprehend that level of stress. They're not going to understand the anxiety and the overwhelm that comes with it. They're just going to see you as someone who's got the cash and look like you got it all figured out. So it plays into that facade where it's easier just to pretend you've got it all together, because you don't want to let those people down or to ruin the image that actually you are Superman. And that's what the shadow side of success is for me. It's really highlighting that running a business is incredibly tough. And I really feel like we need to be having a bigger conversation about this, because it's become the cool thing to do. Like, the amount of, you go on LinkedIn and the amount of people who headline it's founder, entrepreneur, CEO, and it's just like everyone thinks that you need to have a side hustle or build a business to have a successful life. Whereas the reality is most businesses fail. And it's incredibly challenging, especially the first few years. And for the majority of people, it's just not worth the risk. It's not worth the stress and pressure.
100%. And statistically speaking, you're better off working for a larger company. If your goal is to make money, if that really is your goal, you're better off getting qualified and working for a large company and working your way up. I'm not saying you'll have a fulfilled life, but if money is your goal, you actually have a better chance of making it that way than what you do starting a business. I mean, I'm doing a BSc in business administration at the moment, and I always had a reasonably good idea about many aspects of business. But when you look at some of the intricacies, in terms of the POLC frameworks and the organizational structuring and design and this and that, that's some complex stuff, man. It's some really, really complex stuff that you have to start dealing with. And if you have your own business and you've got to start doing all that stuff, I know a lot of people wing it, but wow, there are so many things that we don't know, let alone what we think we do know.
Yeah. It's also the factor that business school leaves people completely unprepared for what running a business actually is. Like, in the work that I do, the majority of the conversations I'm having with clients is to deal with issues relating to other people. It's having to field conversations, how to get your team on board, how to get people motivated, how to get people to really follow through with what they need to do. Like, you think being a successful CEO is just strategy and innovation and all these exciting things. It really isn't.
Small parts.
Yeah. Most of your time is just going to be spent firefighting and dealing with other people's issues. But they don't teach them business school. They don't teach you how to manage a team, how to have these challenging conversations and everything else. And that's why I find a lot of the people I work with are in over their head. Like, the same exact thing happened to me when I first started my business 10 years ago and my first best-selling book came out. Things were going well. We were scaling. I was working with people around the world. I was completely unprepared. I'd never managed a team before. I'd never had challenging conversations. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. So, like you said, I was just winging it and just hoping for the best. And that was where I reached a point where I knew that I couldn't do it anymore. I was burnt out. I hated my business. And I knew if I didn't figure out how to handle this, I needed to go and get a job and throw in the towel. So that was really where I made a decision that figure out how to do this. So that was when I spent the next few years learning about psychology, mindset, managing people, dealing with conflicts, everything else in between to get my own business on track. And it was just where I then pivoted what I'm doing to focus on what I'm doing today. Because I see so many other CEOs and business owners struggling like I was. And that it goes back to the fulfillment issue. Because for me, the thing that really drives me and excites me is I believe that by helping CEOs and business leaders get their business under control, they can then go and help more people. And together we can make the world a better place. So that goes back to knowing what fulfills and excites you.
And that's a great mission statement to have.
But I think everyone listening to this needs to figure that out for themselves. Like, you need to, beyond money and success, you need to figure out what gets you out of bed in the morning. Because I know we said this multiple times, but it's one thing I just really want people to come to terms with, that money ultimately, it's a great thing to to go for, but it's not going to bring happiness. And it's just something I'm seeing so much in the people I'm working with, where they're just not happy with life. Like they're just spending their days in the trenches, they're going home exhausted, and they're not having that joy and fulfillment. And that's why, above all else, I believe we need to make the North Star what is going to bring that joy into your life.
Yes, no, exactly. And you just reminded me of three things, three of my favorite pieces of literature, if I can call it that. So one, when we were talking about the shadow side of success, there's this guy called Tom Dante, who's a very well-known trader, and he had this quote on his Twitter where he said, "Successful trading is like falling pregnant. Everyone congratulates you when it happens, but nobody asks how many times you had to get screwed first." That I think is quite true, because it's the same in business, I think, in general, or for anything, pro athleticism or whatever. Oh, congratulations, but no one asks how many times you had to get knocked up along the way. The other thing that also comes to the fore for me is what you mentioned about winging it, and that business school doesn't teach you everything that you need to know to manage a business in real life. And that is from Yogi Berra, who was a well-known baseball coach back in the 40s and 50s, I think. And he said, in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice. In practice, there is. And that is also another big one for me. And the third and final one is from a book called The Alchemist. I don't know if you've read it or heard of The Alchemist.
I know it. I haven't read it.
Brilliant book. Very, very plainly written, but I love it. And there was a scene where this boy asks the alchemist, why did certain alchemists never learn how to turn lead into gold? And then he said that it's because they were only interested in the gold and not living out the destiny that it requires to learn how to turn lead into gold. Like your opinion on all and your thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, I love that way of framing it. And yeah, this is something that I talk about in the new book, of just really highlighting the fact that even though this sounds cheesy and fluffy, happiness doesn't come in the end result. It comes in the journey, and learning to really embrace what you're doing, the good and the bad, and focusing on the process. And I think this is something that as high achievers, we're all guilty of. We just fixate on the future and where we're trying to get to and what we want to achieve and what we want to make happen. And we overlook the fact that that's not going to make us happy. What's going to make us happy is really being present in the moment and living a life with intention. And I think that for me has been a big turning point in my own life over the last few years, because all the stuff I talk about, I'm massively guilty of myself. Like these are all challenges I've been through personally. And that's why I've really focusing on helping other people get those realizations and get under control. Because it is the journey and the process we go through that brings the fulfillment and happiness in our lives.
Byron, I actually wanted to ask you regarding something that occurred to me when I was listening to another podcast the other day, was that one of the things and I'm just going to use a trading context, but I think it's the same in business in general, is that when you have to make decisions that are, directly going to affect your livelihood, say, for example, you want to take a trade. One of the things that can actually affect your decision making is the stress association that or the fear association that you have to losing that money, or what if it goes wrong? Ooh, what do I do? Do you have any ways that you teach your clients to override or suppress or eliminate that, if I can use those words?
Yeah, for me, it's all about context, because a lot of the time mentally we have this problem where we build up situations in our mind and completely blow them out of proportion. So when we do have these big decisions, there are lots on the line, we focus on the worst case scenario. So we talk ourselves out of taking actions because of that fear of what could go wrong. And that fear is very real. Very big situations where the things can be turned upside down. But we also need to then shift the perspective to what we're actually taking the situation for. Like, why do you want to take that action? What are you trying to move towards? And also figuring out, even if it does go wrong, what will you do then? Because you can make a huge risk and you can go down an avenue that could have big consequences. However, chances are, if it does go wrong, you'll find a way through it. So it's almost putting into perspective of, okay, even if this does go wrong, what action will I take? So you can put yourself at ease knowing that you can figure it out and navigate it accordingly. And it's also then really being true to yourself of, if you're playing a completely reckless move, with huge consequences, even if there is a big upside, it's actually the right path to go by. Because hope is not a strategy. So if you're just making a decision and then just praying that it's all going to turn out, it's then having the intuition to know that actually this maybe isn't the most calculated move. Do you really want to put everything on the line, just hoping that it's going to work out? Because if you haven't got strong evidence and supporting beliefs that it's going to actually factor out, I would challenge as to why someone's going down that path, because the huge payoff is not always worth the risk.
And you have
So you
no
need
control
to,
over that, the payoff
yeah,
side at least.
yeah. So you need to really be basing your decisions with, it's the same as when you're investing in a company. A company could have huge upside, but if they haven't got the right financials, they haven't got the right team in place, the right board and everything else, it's probably not going to be worth the investment. You'd be better off putting your money in a business that has good financials and prospects. And this is why if your decision is just based on hoping for it, you need to then pull yourself back and figure out why you want to do that. Because if it's a short-term move, hoping for the best, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is really coming to terms with what you're focusing on. Because a lot of the time, like I said, we build it up in our mind and we blow these issues out of proportion. And one of my favorite sayings is if you stress about something before it happens, you're essentially putting yourself through it twice. And this is why it's all about bringing your focus from the future into the present of what can you do about it? What can you do today to really start avoiding that outcome? Because I see this all the time in the clients I work with. They're worried of what if they run out of runway, or what if something goes wrong in the market, or all of these problems, and paralyzes them. So then they do nothing and they shut down. And this is why it's all about figuring out, yes, there's a very real possibility, but what can you do today to start turning it around? What are the actions you can take to start avoiding it? Because in life, there's always going to be that potential consequence. It's the same as what if I go for a walk later and I get hit by a bus? Like, if we always worry about these things, you would never do anything. And this is why you need to figure out, okay, what actions can you take that are going to allow you to control as much as you can? And then just doing the best that you can to follow through with it. So I think it's a little bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think there's a few different perspectives that hits it from.
No, it's absolutely perfect, because I looking at myself, that sometimes I am prone to falling prey to analysis paralysis. And I have a friend who mentioned that he spoke to a trading psychologist who said that it's often very difficult for people to go over from being an analyst to being an executor. And at the end of the day, how well you execute means far more than how well you analyze the situation. Would you agree?
Yeah, because a lot of the time, more information doesn't always lead to better results. Because this is the same reason why a lot of people get stuck with personal development, is they spend so much of their time reading books and doing courses and studying things that they're then overwhelmed and they don't know where to begin. And it's the same in business and the trading, where there's just so many different paths you could go down. Sometimes the best thing to do is actually to know less. It's just knowing enough to make an informed decision to a point that you're not overwhelming yourself. Because a lot of the time, if you just take action, if it goes wrong, you can then pivot and figure it out. And it's better to be pushing forward than it is just to delay and hold back. Not always. You don't want to make short-sighted decisions and just make it up as you go along, but you need to know enough to move forward. And this is one of the biggest things I see holding people back from making progress in their life. They overthink, whereas and hoping that they'll get all the clarity and they'll know the perfect decision, where a lot of the time that only comes from when you've taken action. You make a decision, move forward, figure it out, what worked, what didn't, then take the next action.
Is there a simple way of getting rid of overthinking, or is it a bit more complex than that?
It's just figuring out and determining where you're trying to get to, what are the options available, what is the best path that you see currently, and then pushing yourself to do it. Like, it's a very simplistic way of breaking it down, but it is essentially that. It's just making a calculating decision, because you're never going to know the alternative to any decision you make. So the more you overthink it and build it up in your mind, you're actually just holding yourself back from making progress. But momentum comes from consistent action and moving forward.
Yeah, because waiting for the right moment is also a very common one that I've noticed. Look, I'm guilty of it too. I've also tried to convince myself that I'm delaying something because I'm waiting for the right moment. But you know what I found? 99 out of 100 times, the right moment never damn well comes. The right moment was the moment when I thought of doing it, but didn't end up doing it, whatever it might have been.
Yeah. And another way to do it as well is just to figure out why holding back. Like, because you don't have enough information. Like, is your intuition just being like, do you know what? I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know if this is the correct path. Or is it because you're sabotaging yourself because you're focusing too much on what if you fail, the perceived risks, or
Ah,
everything else? And that's a really good way to just be in check with yourself. Because most of the time when we overthink, it's because we're getting stuck in our own head. We're procrastinating over what we know we should be doing because of all of the mental stories of what if it goes wrong? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good enough? All of those things keep us stuck in our head. And this is why you need to figure out, is that the case? Or is it truly because you don't know enough? And if you don't know enough, then go and find more information. Figure out, okay, what do you need to feel confident in making a decision? Do you need more data? Do you need more insights? Do you need to speak to other people who can give you guidance? No, you have everything you need. Then you have to push through the fear and you really have to get out of your own way.
do you think the fear of success is a real thing, or is that just self-help guru nonsense? Because there's a
Yeah.
lot of that too, as we know, a lot of fluff
Yeah.
and things that they tell us that, you just need to get over this, and why don't you just is a very dangerous phrase to use, in my opinion, because if it was so simple, wouldn't everyone do it?
Yeah. Fear of success is 100% a real thing. And the interesting thing is people always talk about fear of failure, but people don't figure out of what actually happens of what you succeed. Because a lot of people fear of what's going to happen if they actually make it successful. What if they build this business and then they have this huge pressure on themselves to perform and deliver? What if they get that success and then they lose touch with their family? They're not enough around for their kids. What if they actually put themselves out there and then they have to follow through? It's a very real thing. And I talk about it in Maybe You Should Give Up. And the example I give is actually myself when I first started my business, because I spent years studying and researching and figuring out what I wanted to do. And I remember the first sales call I ever got on. I was taking the lady through the process and talking to her about how I could help and all of her challenges and stuff. And when it was going really well, and I remember there was this panic that set in of, if this person says yes, what am I going to do then? Because I'd never coached someone before. And there was this fear of, what if I can't deliver? What if I don't know what I'm doing? And I just started getting stuck in my own head. And I'm sure she could sense it, because in the end, the sales call didn't go well.
They're
And
amazing. People are amazing at
she didn't
sensing
sign on.
that, aren't
Yeah.
they?
But I 100% sabotaged myself in that moment. And I can look back and I know that what got in the way was myself there. And it 100% was a fear of success, because it's okay, if I achieve this now, what then? And that fear pushed me away from what I needed to do. And luckily, I
Yeah.
could recognize that, and then I figured out what I needed to feel ready for it. But it is a huge problem. I see a lot coming up in conversations and challenges with people I'm working with.
You know what struck, it's such a brilliant answer you gave there. Thank you for that. You know what's really struck me about that is that maybe the fear of success is the fear of the responsibility that comes with it, because it doesn't take much effort to be a failure, or I don't like using the word failure, but for lack of a better one, to be a proverbial loser or failure, it doesn't take much effort. There's little to no responsibility that comes with that. There's massive price that comes with that, no question about it, but it doesn't require a lot of responsibility. But what is the one thing that many people are afraid of? Responsibility and accountability. I've got this. Now what? What do I do with this now?
Yeah. I'd say that's definitely a part of it. And there's also the part of the stress and the pressure. And also, people are very fearful of what everyone else is going to think. So it's like, what if I fail and I finally do this? And what if people judge me? What if people talk about me? What if
Mm.
people look at me in a different way? And all of that again can build up all these mental stories, and that can hold so many people back from living the life that they want. So I think fear of success is something that we do need to talk more about as a society, because, like you said, failure is one of the most common ones that everyone knows about. But fear of success can be just as self-sabotaging. It's just when you're on the verge of something great, you start taking actions that are very much a self-destructive cycle that stops you from getting the result that you want. And you really need to be aware of that, because if you keep getting stuck in your own way, you're just going to be your own worst enemy.
You know, we were talking earlier, for example, also about motivation and discipline. And one of the best examples that was given to me was by a guy called Jocko Willink, who wrote this book called Extreme Ownership. I highly recommend it to anyone because it's all about taking full ownership for your life. As he said, when things go well in your life, it's your fault. When things go wrong in your life, it's your fault. You know, everything in your life really boils down to how you handle things and how you take accountability for it. But he mentioned that motivation is not enough. I think if I remember correctly, you used the analogy that motivation is like a spark and discipline is like the fuel, the gas, or the oil that keeps it burning. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talk about this quite a lot in my own content, where motivation is great and anyone can take action when they feel motivated. But it's what you do on the days that you don't feel like following through that's really going to separate you from everyone else. And I actually did a video from my car a few days ago where I'd had a really long week. I was exhausted and I just didn't want to go to the gym. I remember just like sitting down and just thinking, like, I just want to lie on the couch and have a nap. But in those moments, I had no motivation. But the way that I pushed myself to face it was going back to what we spoke about earlier on this.
Order
It
of
was figuring out,
consequences.
okay, what were my goals? And then what would the person that I want to become do right now? The person who's got the body, who's in shape, who's doing all those things, what would they have done? Would they have made excuses and just lay on the couch watching Netflix? Or would they have just pushed through it? Because a lot of the time people think motivation being inspired and wanting to take action, whereas actually motivation comes from building momentum and following through. Like we've all seen this where you don't feel like doing something, but you get going and you get some quick wins, you
I
make
feel that
progress
like that a
and you
lot.
push through it.
I
Yeah.
feel like that
So
a hell of a lot. I don't
yeah,
know about you, but I have
yeah,
many days at least. I don't want to sound like I'm miserable, but I would say about 50% of the time, I don't always feel like working out
yeah,
or getting up and studying or working. I don't know if you get that, but I
yeah.
do.
It happens constantly. Like I'd never want to just be like, oh, I've got it all together. Look at me, I'm so great. Like I have so many days where I don't feel motivated. It happened to me yesterday where I had a day of filming content and my whole morning was just filming TikTok and Instagram videos. And I was like, I do not feel like doing this today. But I knew that I needed to get done. And once I got the first video done, I was actually feeling pretty good. I was like, you know what, that went well. And I knocked out 7 other videos in about 90-minute span. And it's just like, that's how motivation comes through taking action. And this is why so many people waste their lives hoping to feel motivated. It's like, no, if you want to get results, you need to take motivation out of the equation. You need to figure out what are the actions you need to take. You need to push yourself to face it. That's how you start actually building momentum. So, yeah, I completely agree with the whole thing of motivation is just setting people up for failure. It's and that's why just to reinforce what I said earlier, the way you get motivated, you figure out what you want and you figure out that future version of you who's achieved it and you push yourself to do what they would do. That's how you get it, unlock it within yourself, not just hoping you feel like doing it.
One more topic that I would definitely love to discuss with you is procrastination. Now, some people say that, you know, we are all procrastinators. There's no such thing as someone who is not a procrastinator. Apparently, we all do it in varying degrees and stuff. And there's an argument to be made for procrastination. Sometimes it's good to wait or rather delay action and stuff. But, you know, there are other times where procrastination can also screw you over quite badly. What are your thoughts on the pros and the cons of procrastination and how to overcome it, but also how to use it effectively to your advantage? If you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on it at all.
Yeah, the important thing to understand with procrastination is the reason why you're procrastinating is you're viewing a task and you're assigning a negative emotion to it. Whether it's you starting diving into that report, it's mundane, you don't feel like doing it. You're procrastinating over having a difficult conversation because you know it's going to be uncomfortable. Whatever it is, you're viewing that situation and you're viewing it in a negative light. And this is why you really need to be in tune with yourself as to why you're actually procrastinating. Is it a case of you're putting off making a decision because you don't have enough information or you don't know what to do. That's very different to procrastinating because you don't feel like taking action. And this is why you have to really be honest and know yourself enough to why you're putting it off. Because in the situations where you are just scrolling through the news feed or avoiding doing what you know you need to do, you have to mentally go through the mindset shift of there's a 3-step process I use with clients. The step number 1 is you have to remind yourself that you and you alone are responsible for creating results in your life. You're the only one who can actually make this happen. So you have to really figure out, okay, these are the goals. This is what I want to achieve. Me procrastinating it is taking me away from what I truly want. The second thing you need to do is focus on what needs to get done. So what is the task you need to do? What's the outcome you want to create? How do you need to handle it? And the third thing you need to do is take action. It seems really simple, but you have to push yourself to face what you need to do. And the way I like to do it myself, it's just counting down from 3, 2, 1, and just be like, 3, 2, 1, I'm going to dive in. Because a lot of the time, as soon as we jump, then it becomes easier. It's the same as a bungee jumper still at the top of the mountain. The longer they procrastinate, the worse it becomes. The more that fear and anxiety builds up inside them until they're paralyzed and they can't move. Whereas they could immediately solve their problem by jumping. It's not going to make everything better, but it's going to get them one step closer towards where they want. And it's the same for anyone listening to this. A lot of the time, your problems in life, you could solve them by just jumping. And it's the same with your procrastination. You have to push yourself to get started. Because once you do, that's how you'll see it. Actually, it's not that bad. Or at least you can get through it and it's not the end of the world. So when you can start dealing with that and you can take consistent action in your life, that's how you'll get consistent results.
Yeah, Richard Bandler, who was one of the co-founders of NLP, said something really interesting too, that humanity's greatest fear is not the fear of death, but rather the fear of the unfamiliar. Perhaps that's why we don't do a lot of things in life, because of that exact fear of the unfamiliarity.
Yeah, this goes along to how our brains are wired. And it's just figuring out and recognizing that our brains are programmed in a way that wants to preserve quantity of life, sorry, not quality. And that means it wants to keep everything the same type of relationships, the same amount of weight on your body, the same amount of wealth, happiness, and joy. It wants to keep everything the same. The reason being is everything in your past has been survived, meaning it's far safer than anything new, whereas all of your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, they're all new, meaning they have inherent risks. And this is why your brain will do everything it can to keep you where you are, filling your head with all of these doubts, fears. What if you're not good enough? What if people judge you? Whatever it is, because it wants to keep you where you are, getting you to procrastinate and avoid going after what you want. And this is why you're never going to be able to take control of the life that you want until you get out of your own head.
So
And
it's not just
that,
your peers, it's your actual brain too.
yeah,
I never thought of it that way.
yeah, it's your subconscious programming. It's the way your brain's been wired, and this is the whole introduction to maybe you should give up. It talks about the way your brain's been programmed and everything I just said, and then it takes someone through 7 things where and beliefs they need to reprogram in order to take control of their life. Because all of the things I found over the last few years that we get stuck in our own head over, and it goes back to putting off going after what we want. It is fears because our brain wants to keep us trapped. And this is why you need to understand on a subconscious level that your mold of the world and the way you look at things is in many ways keeping you trapped because it's based on familiarity and wanting to keep you safe. Whereas what you want is on the other side of that. And until you learn to get out of your own head, you're never going to reach your potential or live the life that you could.
And maybe that's exactly, to conclude this fascinating conversation that we just had, maybe that's exactly what separates the CEOs, the top CEOs from the mediocre ones, or the pro athletes from the mediocre ones, or just any form of excellence from mediocrity. It's not necessarily about how much talent you have or how hard you work and stuff. It's about getting out of your own way. That's kind of what I'm getting from this.
Yeah, I'm such a big believer that is the truth, because so many times the biggest stumbling block in the way of our success is ourselves. It's the stories we tell ourselves, our fears, our doubts, and everything going on, keeping us stuck in our own head. And this is why when you learn to really navigate that and get out of your own head, that's when you can push yourself forward. And it's just having that self-awareness about what's truly going on. You need to figure out, okay, what's happening here? What do I want? Where am I going? And what's getting me to cause hold myself back. When you know that and you can break through it, that's how you get to the next level.
Byron, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I could literally talk to you all day, mate, because I think you have such a wealth of information to share, and we have so many similarities and things that we bounce off one another. Before I let you go, where can people find you, and what other new projects do you have lined up after maybe you should give up?
So people can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just search for Byron Morrison. I put out daily videos and content. Also, my website, byronmorrison.com. And you can get all of my books on Amazon or anywhere you can buy books. So, yeah, as for new projects, maybe you should give up's coming out in June. So that's my focus for the next 8 months.
Okay.
We're just driving pre-orders and getting that out. And then from there, in the next few years, I'm looking to start launching more of a speaking career. I want to do a lot more live events and working with people. And
we should actually do some. We should actually do some live events. I've been doing live events, since last year, and it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's my big focus for the next couple of years. And then we're going to continue growing the team. And I want to take on some other coaches to deliver some of my programs. And we're going to, there's a few areas we want to scale into. So yeah, without getting ahead of myself, like that's pretty much the new book, and just pushing that is my big focus for the next 8-12 months, and then we'll start building everything else out. But yeah,
fantastic. Sounds like a lot going on. Thanks so much for your time, my friend. I mean, I really appreciate it, and I cannot wait to share this with the rest of the world. It's going to be really, really interesting to see everyone's response, and I think it's going to be of massive help to not only myself, but to a lot of other traders and investors who just want to have a better understanding of themselves now to navigate their own minds.
Yep. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks a lot, mate. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Black Heart Red Spade podcast. For more information, please visit our website at www.blackheartredspade.com or follow us on Twitter at BHeartRSpade.